Hello, everyone. This is Liz on Tuesday. So today is, change of plans. We are doing Director Day today, as I was not able to do yesterday. But I'm very glad that I can do it at all because I'm talking about one of my favorite action directors, John Woo. That name might sound familiar. He hasn't made films in America for about, almost 20 years, but he's made some of the most influential action films and is consistently cited among a lot of American directors. You might know him from movies like Hard Target, great Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle. More than likely, you know him from the movie Face Off, in which John Travolta and Nick Cage switch faces and both overact to the extreme. So let's get into John Woo. He was born May 1st in 1946 in Guangzhou, China, and this was right before the end of the Chinese Civil War. So if you need a little bit of background, the Chinese Civil War was between Chiang Kai shek's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists. Obviously, since we know how history happened, we know that the communists ended up winning, and the nationalists went to Taiwan, which, when Japan lost the war in 1945, they ceded their control of Taiwan. So also, considering Japan was also were like fighting in China at the time, there was a period of time where the nationalists and the communists put aside their differences to defeat the Chinese. But that's a history discussion, although I do love bringing that into my discussions of film. So, right when the communists won the Civil War, there was this push against anything considered bourgeois or Western. And considering John Woo's family were Christians, they decided, let's leave before things get bad, which really not a bad idea. If you remember me discussing Jiang Jimu, his family, considering they were on the nationalist side, were put into labor camps. So John Woo's family fled to Hong Kong, and his mother was the only one who could work because his father was a teacher, but he had tuberculosis. So they lived a very impoverished life because she could only really do manual labor. And in the 1953, the Shen Kit Mei fire helped demolish their home. So while they were able to relocate and rebuild due to charity, he still lived a fairly rough life. There was an area, he lived in an area, there was a lot of crime. Also, he had a medical condition with his spine and he had to have surgery when he was 8 years old. So, didn't have a happiest childhood growing up. So, for John Woo, his escape was cinema. There were theaters in Hong Kong. So he would go and watch American musicals. So if you've seen any of his films, you might start to see a connection between the theatricality of his movies and American musicals that he's seen. And as he got older, he watched movies like filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa, Sergio Leone, Sam Peckinpah, and Jean-Pierre Melville. So he has a fairly wide slate of directors that have influenced him. And I think, like a lot of these directors, we kind of see at a young age, they just decide, that's it, I'm going into movies, I know exactly what I want to do with my life. Sorry, completely lost my screen for a moment. So in 1969, he becomes a script supervisor at the Cathay Film Company. So Hong Kong actually has a pretty burgeoning film industry in the late 60s, especially in the 70s. And in 1971, he starts working at Shaw Brothers, which, if you are a fan of old kung fu movies, you have heard the Shaw Brothers. Just for some reference, Quentin Tarantino, RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan, they are huge fans of Shaw Brothers productions. And he becomes an assistant director to director Chad Chang. Hope I am saying that right. His first movie is completed in 1973, and it's called The Young Dragons, but it is not released until 1975 due to violent content. Yeah, some of those 70s kung fu movies, we think of them as bloodless, but they're not all bloodless. 1976, he works with Jackie Chan in the film Hand of Death, and this is Jackie Chan when he is also on his rise to becoming a big martial arts star. And it is kind of interesting that, like, oh, these two rising stars met before their careers really took off. And in 1986, 10 years later, like, he worked very consistently. But it wasn't until 1986 when his movie A Better Tomorrow came out that he had his breakout. And really, A Better Tomorrow is the film where you truly see himself kind of a concise vision of who he is as a filmmaker. It's a gangster film, and it also has a lot of different type, new action styles in it, and it also has this style of what one of my old professors called hyper masculinity. So you had these very intimate and emotional friendships between men, and I don't mean intimate in an erotic sense, but it's intimate in that, you know, they love each other. They've got each other's back. If one of them's injured, he'll hold him in his, like, the other one will hold his partner in his arms and cry. It is we think of masculinity in American films as like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, but very different definition in Hong Kong action movies. So he then has, in 1989, The Killer, another huge film on an international scale. He's starting to get noticed, not just in Hong Kong, but by people all over the world. And probably, like, it's that and Hard Boiled in 1992, which really gets the attention of American filmmakers. Also, fun fact, all three of these movies star Chow Yun-fat. He is a consistent collaborator with John Woo. So 1993, he comes to America to make Hard Target. Sam Raimi produced the movie and also, was I think a pretty big believer in John Woo, but the studios were kind of unsure. Like, I don't know if this guy's going to work in our system. So according to rumors, Sam Raimi was also their backup in case John Woo just couldn't direct the picture. But proved everybody wrong, and he absolutely could. If you've not seen Hard Target, it's cheesy, but as an action movie, I think it is one of the best America has to offer. It's amazingly well choreographed. You also have Jean-Claude Van Damme, who is an incredible martial artist and fighter in his own right. And John Woo just absolutely knows how to frame every spin kick and when to slow-mo and whatnot. It's a lot of fun. So it was a fun little anecdote from working on the set. The weapon fire, because there's a lot of gung-fu on this as well, on the set was considered dangerous, which led to the crew to build a new bulletproof plexiglass shield that would be bolted to the camera. The shield was particularly useful in one sequence in Hard Target when Van Damme empties a magazine of ammo into the camera. These camera dollies were nicknamed by the crew as the Woo Woo Choo Choo. So that's a cute little anecdote. There's also, as John Woo says, he had a very different vision as to what he wanted to do with Hard Target. A lot more attention on Lance Henriksen, and as he tells it, Jean-Claude Van Damme really kind of took the film away from him and edited it down. I still think it works, and I think it is a great look at John Woo's style, but he has kind of said in the past he's not exactly happy with the production of that film. 96, he has Broken Arrow, and 97, he has probably the most popular American film, which is Face Off, which John Travolta, Nick Cage, hamming it up on screen. There's some weird sci-fi technology with fate switching. It really is a movie that makes no sense, but again, it is an insanely fun action movie, and there is this scene where this kid is listening to Judy Garland while an intense violent scene is going on behind him of, like, kung fu and guns. And that is something you're only gonna get in a John Woo movie. There's also dubs, which John Woo likes to use, but we'll go into that later. 2000, he makes Mission Impossible 2 with Tom Cruise, and that's probably his last, I would say, good American film. He has his decline, which is Wind Talkers with Nick Cage, which, not a great movie, and Paycheck, which I fell asleep watching it, and I was on a plane, and I was bored, so that's not a great endorsement of the movie. And honestly, after that, he decided, like, okay, I'm kind of done with Hollywood. I'm disappointed. I'm burnt out. And he goes back to China, goes back to Hong Kong. He makes Red Cliff, which is a historical epic, and actually beats the box office record held by Titanic in China. This is in 2008. And he makes a wuxia film in 2010 called Reign of Assassins. Seems like a lot of these Chinese directors, be they from Hong Kong or mainland, eventually they have to make at least one wuxia film. He actually goes more to the historical drama end, a romantic drama called The Crossing, which is about the Chinese Civil War, and the second half of the movie is about couples fleeing to Taiwan. Yeah, comes from probably a little bit of a personal place. But 2017, he returns to his gangster roots and makes Manhunt and gets acclaim from not only Chinese film critics, but international film critics. So, why is John Woo important? Well, he really, I think, re-energized and reimagined what action films can be. He helped put Hong Kong action movies on the map. If you, a lot of the Hong Kong action movies before, they had stuff like, Police Story, but if you ask people what they've heard of Hong Kong action, a lot of people will say, oh, Hard Boiled, The Killer, or Better Tomorrow. He also popularized a lot of the moves and styles that you see in action films now. So if you've seen the two guys facing back to back with guns, that's from him. If you've seen the guy jumping through the air with two guns, that's from him. Also, if you've seen the movie Shoot 'Em Up, which involves Clive Owen shooting a bunch of guns and trying to protect a baby, that is a direct homage to John Woo. And also, he brought theatricality to action. Or I would say back, because if you do watch some action movies, like, there is a flair to it, especially if you watch something like Kurosawa, but there was for a while this idea that if there was action, it had to be hard, it had to be gritty, it had to be realistic. And John Woo completely just doesn't believe that. In Hard Target, like, Jean-Claude Van Damme flies down on a float, Mardi Gras float, to shoot at people. He goes all out with set pieces. And he also just loves to use doves. If you watch any of his movies, doves will fly around during an action scene. That's actually referenced in anime such as Cowboy Bebop. So if you watch a lot of action films that are made post-80s, you're going to see little bits of influence from John Woo. And again, there's a reason people like Tarantino will reference him as an inspiration for his films, or at least as a fan of his movies. Also, fun fact, last year when there was the whole hubbub over Scorsese and the Marvel movies, he did get his thoughts on Marvel as well. He just said that he understands why they're popular, but he's worried about the effect they will have on people's film knowledge. And I see that as well. I am kind of team Scorsese and John Woo. I think these movies are fine, but they cannot be your only intake for cinema. And if anything, I think if you people do point to the MCU as like, yes, it's cinematic, it's stylized action. And well, yes, it is. I'm going to say, if you absolutely want to see some real stylized action, go watch Hard Boiled. And that is where I'll conclude the movie with just saying, where do I start with John Woo? If you'd like to watch one of his American movies, I would say watch Hard Target. And if you want to watch one of his Hong Kong movies, I would say watch Hard Boiled. We do have Hard Boiled at the library, so feel free to place a hold for it. Have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow.